What's up, ladies and gents? I loved this interview with Shannon. She is an extremely prolific polyglot who speaks 15 languages while also balancing being a professional musician, a mom, and an entrepreneur. That said, you will learn a ton from her about effective learning and what to do if you don't have a lot of time. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, before we get started, I wanted to share with you what this real-lifer told us. They were afraid of making mistakes and stuck in their learning. But now they are learning without getting bored. So for those of you that are new here, every week we will help you to understand fast speech, to be understood by anyone, and even to connect to the world. It's simple. Become a real-lifer by hitting that subscribe button and the bell on below, and you won't miss a single lesson.
It's not even that, it's too, like, when a lot of the time, especially with your first foreign language, when you ask someone, okay, why do you want to learn this language? It's like, oh, well, I just need to learn English, or I want to learn English, or it will help me with my work if I speak English. There's not something really clear about what they want to do in English. And so it's great to have like that ultimate goal. It's like, yeah, I want to speak English fluently. I want to be really comfortable in this language. But what exactly does that mean for right now? So for me with my languages, it's like, yes, I'd love to be able to just speak all of them, you know, at a native like level and have a great accent and make very few mistakes and be super confident just like that, switching into another language. But to get there, I need to have like these little milestones that I hit along the way. I do like to kind of have control over what I want to work on in my lessons for a couple of reasons, but one is I typically have pretty specific goals of what I want to be able to do in each language. And so I have a pretty good idea as well of what I need to work on to reach those goals and to be able to do those things that I need to do. So I tend to guide my teachers to help me accomplish those things. But that does come from years of experience studying languages. I don't think I could have done that when I started.
It's just so much fantastic advice there. So this really comes back to what you were saying earlier in the interview, that one of the important things for you is designing your own lessons and taking that responsibility. And so many people, English learners certainly, and I think just anyone learning any language, coming from our experience probably in high school and in school, that we want the teacher to do all the work. We're expecting that teacher to make us fluent. We're expecting them to tell us exactly what we need to do in order to get to that point of fluency. So I just love all this advice that you're giving that really puts the responsibility in your own hands, that has you reflect and design what do you need to learn the language for. And then basically if you're getting a tutor, I also agree that for many, many people, it can be very beneficial to start early on speaking with someone so that you are gaining that confidence like we were talking about earlier. But that if you can come to that person saying, I specifically want to learn this, or I want to use this resource or read this book or watch this show, then they're going to be much more prepared to help you to use the language as you need to use it. And I think that in turn will lead you to be able to speak it more confidently, because you'll have what you need to talk about to really live the language. So to maybe be having the same conversations that you would have in your native language. So one of the things I was curious about is, say that you're intermediate in some language and you have a course book, a textbook, a grammar book, whatever, just sitting on the shelf gathering dust that you haven't looked at in a long time. Do you have any tips that someone could use in this situation to repurpose that material?
For me, it's two things. One, it's using what you have. And then two, it's not using too much at the same time, because for a lot of language learners, resources actually become a hidden form of procrastination without us even realizing it. So what'll happen is we'll have like 2 to 3 different course books, and we'll kind of have them all open at the same time. We'll be working through one, we'll do chapter 1, we'll do chapter 2, and then we go to do chapter 3 and it's like, ugh, this hurts my brain. I don't want to do this right now. So we go to book number 2 and we do chapter 1. Super easy. Then we do chapter 2. And so we end up just learning the same things over and over again so we just kind of get this broader knowledge of this very basic thing, and our language looks like this 1 to 2 inch little ability bar. And we never actually get here, raising that bar, because we're using these resources to procrastinate. We're doing busy work. We're not actually making the next level learning or the next steps that we need to take in order to continue progressing with our languages. So for me, it's pick one of those course books and just work through it. The second one, if you finish the first one and you decide to use the second one, it'll maybe it'll help you better learn some of what you did in the first course book, but you're going to work through it a lot more quickly because a lot of it will be review, or you may find that you don't need it or want it at all anymore, but just like stick with one. So for me, minimizing is not using any more than 3 to 5 resources at a time. And each of those resources needs to cover the 4 core skills plus vocabulary. So I typically have something that covers vocabulary, something that covers listening, something that covers speaking, something that covers writing, and something that covers reading. And so as long as I've got those 4 skills covered, I try to stick with 3 to 5 resources. And yes, it's 5 things. I don't necessarily have one resource for each of the 5 things. I have resources that kind of maybe do 3 or 2. So there's a little bit of overlap, but not a lot. You want to avoid as much overlap as possible. Otherwise, it really is just busy work.
So this is just a taste of this amazing interview I had with Shannon. And you can listen to the full interview for free wherever you listen to podcasts. However, what I would recommend is that you listen to it on the RealLife app, because it's the only place where you can listen with the full interactive transcript and learn all of the most important vocabulary. What's more, on the RealLife app, at the touch of a button, you can have a conversation in English with another learner in a different part of the world. I bet this all sounds like a dream, right? Well, now it's a dream come true. Download it for free by clicking up here or down in the description below. Or alternatively, you can just search for RealLife English in the Google Play or Apple App Store.
And then the other thing that's a part of this, like I said, like using what you have. So there is no perfect resource.
Right.
It just doesn't exist. And the reason for that is because everyone learns differently. Everyone is at a slightly different level. What everyone can do and what everyone knows is different, and how everyone learns is different. So there's just, you would need a resource for every single person for it to be the perfect resource, and it would only be the perfect resource for that person. So knowing that, you can't keep hunting for that perfect resource. Basically, if a resource has made it to the point that it's published, it's probably good enough. So just use what you have, and just skip everything that doesn't work for you. So if there's a list of 20 vocab words, if you really only think you need 5 of them, ignore the other 15. If you don't find the benefit of doing the exercises in the books, skip the exercises. If you don't find the explanations helpful, make a note and then go look up an explanation for that one specific thing elsewhere. But just use what you have. Because like I said, if it's been published, it's a good enough resource and there's things in it that are useful to you. And if it's not a good enough resource for you, like it just doesn't work for you, then again, use something else.
Yeah. The main thing I'm seeing there is that you are finding the convenient moments throughout your day and figuring out what can you do with those convenient moments to turn them into learning opportunities, especially if you have so many languages. I imagine to maintain 5 at the same time, then you probably really need to optimize the time that you have to dedicate to each one.
Yeah, I definitely think optimization is a good word for this, especially lately. And like we said with Notion, it's like I've been coming up with a system where I actually have all of my tutors on Notion now. So before, it's like some of them would type notes into the Skype chat, some of them would use a Google document, some of them would use like something else. And so now I have them all using Notion. So I have a table with like each lesson. And so I'll title the lesson something based on whatever it was that we talked about. And so then I set up a table and my teacher and I are actually taking notes into Notion. And ultimately I want everything to get into Memrise. So in Notion, it's already in table format. So I literally just have to copy and paste it into my master sheet, which is on Google Sheets. And then I'm able to like run a duplicate checker to make sure that words aren't in there twice. I'm able to like keep track of what's in the spreadsheet and what's not. I have like a little check button on Notion saying like, you've added this, you haven't added this. And so once a week, I'm able to just take all of that, consolidate it, go through it, clean it up, make sure translations aren't missing, make sure that nothing's already in the sheet. And then I import it into Memrise, and I'm able to keep my Memrise decks up to date and always have something new and that I'm working on with my tutors in them.
I've seen that you're someone who is extremely prolific, that you work in several companies, you create content, you're also a professional musician, as you sort of mentioned. You have kids and dogs, I saw as well, and I guess now just having gotten married recently. So with all of that on your plate, something that I'm really curious about is how do you stay motivated to learn so many languages and to practice those?
It changes. So I don't typically rely on motivation because it's fleeting and it's not really a reliable companion. So I tend to rely on discipline more than motivation. So
Mm-hmm.
I know that, like, if I can kind of segue to a music metaphor. So if I were to wait to be inspired, which is like the same thing as motivated, to write music,
Mm-hmm.
I would never write music because maybe when I have an idea hit, it's not like the right moment. So I make a voice note on my phone, but by the time I actually need to like sit down and work on it, a lot of what was in my head will be gone. So
Right.
I instead work on it regularly. So I sit down with the point of writing. And yes, a lot of what I'm going to output is going to be terrible. But for
Mm-hmm.
every, I don't know, 5 to 10 songs that I write, one comes out that's great. So the same is true for language learning. I can't rely on feeling motivated to study my languages because if I did, I'd probably not study consistently. And
Mm-hmm.
consistent study is so important. And so like sitting down to write music, it's not there's not an inspiration there, but as I'm trying things out and writing things, then the inspiration comes in doing the practice. So the same is true
Right.
with language learning. If you're studying consistently, you're building up the skills that you need to have those moments where you're like, oh, this is awesome. Like, oh, I just had this conversation, or, oh, I was able to talk about this, or I was able to keep it in the language for the song. And those are the moments of motivation, but you only
Mm-hmm.
win those by doing consistent work with the language.
Related to that discipline, what does that look like for you? So you were saying you're kind of showing up every day. Is this random throughout the day? Do you set aside a certain amount of time at the same time period every day? Or how do you make sure that you're showing up every day?
So for me, based on my schedule, it's really difficult to set aside a specific time each day.
Mm-hmm.
There's kid interruptions, I've got work, I have calls, different things. And so every single day for me looks very different.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do, well, it depends on how many languages that I am working on. Right now, it's 5. And so depending on what level that language is at, I'm going to be doing different things. So right now, even though I'm studying 5 languages, 4 of them are really like just kind of maintenance, and Russian is my primary focus. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, what this looks like at this point is for each of those 5 languages, I try to have at least 1 lesson a week. So that's
Mm-hmm.
the first thing. And what I do is I schedule my lessons at the beginning of every single month. So that way I'm committed to them and there's a bit of accountability there because I won't cancel a lesson
Mm-hmm.
unless like something comes up and I have like a call that ends up happening at the same time and I have to, but then I just
Mm-hmm.
reschedule it. But it sets me up so I have like these points throughout the month that I need to show up for. And then with each of my teachers, we work on something different. So, for example, with Russian right now, my teacher and I are reading Game of Thrones in Russian side by side. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
certain amount that I have to read before our next lesson, like we kind of decide in advance. And that gives me something that I have to work on prior to our lessons so that I can show up and talk about it. For
Mm-hmm.
Hungarian, we're currently reading Eye of the World, but my teacher and I also talk about food and recipes a lot. So every once in a while, we'll work on a recipe or we'll just focus on reading. And so that, again, it gives me something that I have to work on throughout the week. And so for each language, it's a little bit different what I'm doing with each teacher, but I basically have something so that there's stuff that I have to do before the next lesson, because if I don't do it, I feel really bad. I'm an upholder based on like the Gretchen Rubin scale. So I really like try to do those things. But other than that, I think it's, like I said, consistency for me is super important. So what I try to do
Mm-hmm.
is have some sort of touch point with the language every single day. And at a bare minimum, what that is for me is doing Memrise. And in Memrise, I've built all of my own decks. So these are vocabulary that I've pulled from everything that I'm learning. I'm really big into consolidating and putting stuff into one place. So Memrise is kind of my home base for all of the learning that I've done across YouTube, Netflix, course books, lessons with teachers, other apps, other tools, anything. So it all goes into there, and I make sure that I study that every single day. In having a clear purpose for why the social situations are happening makes it easier for me to show up to them. And too, with with shyness in particular, feeling confident is really important to be able to navigate through situations where I might normally feel quite shy. And so, that confidence comes from preparation and knowing what you need to know. So obviously with a language, people are people. So there's not like one set protocol. It's like, hi, I'm meeting you for the first time. And everyone's going to say, hello, nice to meet you. How are you? My name is Joe. Where do you live? It doesn't go like that every single time. Like you would, like you've prepared. So you go and you work on this with your teacher. And then I had this problem with Chinese actually. So Chinese, for whatever reason, has like 200 different ways to say, where are you from? I probably knew like 5 different ways, like recognized 5. So the first time I went to China, of course, after someone found out I spoke Chinese, the first thing they wanted to ask me is like, where are you from? Why do you speak Chinese? And so someone would say, where are you from? And they'd say it one way and I'd be like, oh, I'm from California. And then the next time someone else would say it some way completely different. I was constantly looking at my friend like, what are they asking me? Because you don't know how someone's going to say something and you don't know how they're going to respond or what direction they're going to take the conversation. But what you can do is you can prepare as best as possible for when that happens so that, for me, I could have been like, I don't know, bye. I don't understand you. I'm leaving. But because
English.
Exactly. So, but because like I had done some work and I had someone there with me, I was able to more comfortably navigate those situations. But like I said, you can't prepare for everything, but you can prepare for a lot. So if you're practicing having the types of conversations that you want to have, it's like the product demonstrations that I was doing with my Japanese teacher. I had no idea what questions she was going to ask me. All I could do is prepare with what I had. And then she would ask me a question. And I'd be like, sorry, I don't understand. Can you write that down? Or like, what does that mean? So then we'd work through that. And then I would be able to work on preparing my answer. And she would sometimes ask me the same questions because we obviously did this more than once. And sometimes she'd ask me new questions. And in doing that, you get that practice that you need. And, you can always go and practice the same thing with someone else. It's like, okay, I'm going to do my product demonstration for you in Japanese. I want you to ask me questions that you have about this. And so then you might get a new set of questions, or you might get questions asked in the same questions asked differently. And so you're able to keep, like, you start here and you just keep building out what you're able to do. And it prepares you for more situations and you feel more confident in more situations. And it makes it easier to feel less shy. You don't ever not feel shy, but it's easier to kind of overcome that shyness to get through some of those situations that you need to get through. I would say if you don't have a consistent study routine that this week, that you should definitely work on building one. So figure out a set amount that you'd like to study each day, commit to it for a week and see where you're at. The other thing that I recommend doing is not letting yourself get distracted. So if you find that you come up with questions while you're studying or you discover tools that you want to use while you're learning, write them down somewhere so that you can return to them later and keep focused on whatever you're working on at the moment.
I think that log's really important. When I was teaching English, I used to make all of my students keep a log so that they could kind of just get that habit of tracking their learning, because through that, it's that motivation, like you said, of getting streaks, but I think it's also that awareness just of where your time in learning the language is going, which can help you just have reflections and help you to have breakthroughs about what is effective, what's not so effective, and maybe how to be more efficient or how to be more effective in your language learning. So
most often I have a pretty good idea of what I want to work on. Like I'll notice as we're talking that I'm struggling with something and I'll say, okay, we need to talk about this next time. Or in Notion, as I'm studying throughout the week, I'll realize, I'm not really sure how to create diminutives in Russian. So I'll make a note in the Notion sheet so that when we open it up for the next lesson, she'll see right there, like, help me make diminutives in Russian. She'll be like, okay, I see you wanted to work on this. And I'll be like, yes. And then that way I don't forget what I want to work on, because that can happen sometimes.
I hope that you have learned a ton today and gotten inspired. Don't stop your learning now. Remember that the whole interview with Shannon is available for free. It's linked down in the description below. And now it's time to go beyond the classroom and live your English. Aw, yeah.
you're learning another language, you're adding something, you're not deleting. And I think that's
Right.
a common misunderstanding. People think, oh, I need to like delete my Portuguese in order to add in English. It's like, no, the goal here is for you to become bilingual or multilingual. And we all have multiple identities in our everyday lives all the time. I'm not the same person with my mom that I am necessarily, with my best friend. Like we all have multiple identities that we're juggling all the time.